Gobeciate itself was the end of a process, not the beginning of a process. It was something that marked it, was a marker. It was something that brought together the best of everything that they'd accumulated and created it in one place. In southeastern Turkey sits Gobeclete, a 12,000-year-old site older than Stonehenge and the pyramids, often called the birthplace of civilization. But as of right now, it is the oldest temple of this complexity that we have ever found. For decades, archaeologists believed it was all discovered. That changed during a recent investigation. Archaeologists detected a sealed space beneath the mound that showed no signs of natural collapse. Incredible because there's 13 stories that go deep into the ground with ventilation shafts and 15,000 little shafts that bring air to even the deepest of levels. When they finally opened it, they did not find tools, offerings, or a burial. What they found did not fit any known human category from the ancient world. The archaeologists who wouldn't let Gobeclete go. A small group of senior archaeologists never felt fully satisfied with how Gobecate had been studied. This group represents long-term researchers deeply involved in work at the site. Together, they had spent more than 10 years studying Gobeclete, reading excavation reports, walking the plateau season after season, and comparing it to other early Neolithic locations across southeastern Turkey. According to colleagues, the group was known for an almost obsessive familiarity with the mound. They could point out inconsistencies in old maps from memory. They could recall which areas were excavated quickly and which were left untouched, and that is where their doubt began. In published work and private research notes, the archaeologists repeatedly returned to the same concern. Gobeclete was being treated as if it existed only on the surface. Most excavation efforts focused on the visible enclosures, the T-shaped pillars, and the carved reliefs. Those discoveries were extraordinary, but they also shaped a narrow understanding of the site. According to reports, the group believed this focus created a blind spot. They argued that a place capable of such planning and effort was unlikely to limit itself to what could be seen above ground. Over time, that belief hardened into a working idea shared within the team. They suggested that Gobecate was not just built upward, but inward. Some believed that parts of the site were intentionally hidden, either sealed during use or left buried. From the beginning, this was not presented as fact. In interviews, it was described as an unresolved possibility. The archaeologists pointed to unusual gaps in excavation zones and areas of bedrock that were mapped but never fully examined. According to some team members, frustration grew as new seasons passed without addressing those areas. Eventually, discussion turned into action. Rather than push for immediate digging, the team chose a cautious approach. They assembled a small research group focused on non-invasive methods. The group included geophysicists and survey specialists who had worked on other sensitive heritage sites. Their goal was limited and specific. They wanted to look beneath the limestone plateau without disturbing it. According to internal proposals, the aim was not to prove a theory, but to determine whether unexplored voids might exist at all. Gaining approval was not simple. Gobeclete is heavily protected and excavation decisions are closely monitored. After months of review, permission was granted for subsurface imaging only. No digging was allowed. No stone could be removed, just imaging. The team was authorized to examine sections of the mound that had received little attention in earlier campaigns, particularly areas away from the main enclosures and closer to the natural bedrock edges. With approval secured and survey zones marked, the focus shifted from long-held suspicion to direct investigation. If something had been deliberately hidden beneath Gobeclete, the next step would no longer be speculation, but carefully looking beneath the ground itself. The irregularity beneath the limestone. The scanning work began quietly. There was no digging, no noise, and no visible disturbance to the site. The archaeologists relied entirely on ground, penetrating radar moving slowly across sections of the limestone plateau that had long been considered unremarkable. According to reports from the survey, Team. These areas were chosen precisely because they sat outside the famous stone circles. They were zones most researchers had passed over for years without a second look. That decision would soon matter. At first, the scans returned exactly what everyone expected. Dense limestone, solid bedrock, uniform. Readings that suggested nothing of interest beneath the surface. The team documented each pass carefully, recording depth, density, and signal response. A sense of quiet frustration began to settle in. Some team members later admitted they feared the scans would confirm what critics had argued for years, that Gobeclete had already given up everything it had to offer. Then one scan broke the pattern. According to preliminary readings, a section near the edge of the mound showed a disruption in the signal. It was subtle at first, a slight drop in density, a shadow where solid rock should have been. The team paused and recalibrated the equipment, assuming interference or technical error. They ran the scan again. The irregularity remained. As additional passes were completed, the shape began to take form. This was not a natural crack or a loose pocket of soil. The anomaly had defined boundaries. Its depth remained consistent across multiple readings, placing it well below the surface, but not so deep as to suggest a geological fault. According to the geophysicists, natural erosion does not create spaces like this in limestone without visible surface damage. None was present. The location added to the concern. The anomaly sat away from the main enclosures closer to the bedrock edge of the mound. It did not match known storage pits from later periods, and it did not resemble burial shafts documented elsewhere in the region. Burial shafts, when they exist, are typically narrow and vertical. This space appeared wider and contained. According to internal notes, it did not fit any known category the team could reference. To rule out coincidence, scans were repeated from different angles. Each returned the same result: a hollow void with internal structure. The reading suggested walls rather than rough stone. The shape appeared enclosed, not open-ended like a natural cavity. Several team members later described the atmosphere at that moment as tense. This was no longer a technical anomaly. It was an intentional space. As the data was reviewed, another realization followed. This part of Gobeclete had not been ignored by chance. Earlier excavation maps showed the area marked but never opened. According to some researchers, this raised an uncomfortable possibility that earlier teams may have noticed signs of something here, but either chose not to pursue it or lacked the means to investigate safely. What became clear was that scanning alone could not answer what this space was. At some point, the ground above it would have to be examined directly. When surface work began at the identified entry point, the tone of the investigation shifted again. Stone placement did not match collapse patterns. Material density was uniform and deliberate. This was not erosion. This was sealing. And that meant whatever lay beneath had been closed on purpose. The sealed entrance no one expected. Once surface work began above the anomaly, progress slowed immediately. The archaeologists were no longer dealing with abstract data on a screen. They were now working directly against stone. Careful removal of overlying material revealed something that none of the earlier maps had prepared them for. A narrow opening cut directly into the limestone bedrock. It was not wide enough for easy access and not shaped like an ordinary cave mouth. According to excavation notes, its edges were clean and deliberate, showing tool marks rather than natural breakage. This was not a crack that formed over time. It was an entrance that had been made. What stopped the team almost immediately was what blocked it. The opening was filled with a dense black substance that did not resemble local soil, limestone debris, or any known natural deposit from the area. It was uniform in color and texture, pressed tightly into the stone opening. There were no gaps, no loose edges, and no signs that it had shifted over time. According to reports from the excavation team, this material looked placed, not fallen. Some members described a moment of unease as they realized this was not just a blocked entrance. It was a sealed one. Closer inspection only deepened concern. The black material showed no signs of weathering. There were no cracks from heat, no erosion from water, and no signs of collapse from pressure above. This suggested it had remained stable for an extremely long time. According to preliminary assessments, the seal appeared to have done exactly what it was meant to do. It kept the entrance closed, At this stage, the team stopped all physical work and shifted to documentation. Small samples of the sealing material were taken under controlled conditions. These samples were sent for laboratory analysis. According to early test results, the substance was not a single material. It was a composite. Analysis reportedly identified traces of bitumen mixed with ash and organic binders. This combination immediately stood out. Bitumen was known in the ancient world, but its use at a site as old as Gobeclete raised serious questions. When combined with ash and organic material, the mixture would harden over time, becoming resistant to water and air. According to some researchers, this kind of compound was often used for waterproofing, preservation, or isolation in later ancient contexts. Its presence here suggested planning and technical knowledge far beyond what would be expected by chance. What troubled the team most was intent. This was not a casual seal. According to internal discussions, the mixture appeared designed to last. Some archaeologists believe it was engineered specifically to prevent intrusion. Unverified reports from the site describe heated debates over why such effort would be invested in closing a space that was never meant for daily use. According to some interpretations, the seal was meant to protect what lay inside. Others believe it was meant to contain it. Local accounts added another layer of tension. According to locals familiar with the mound, this section of Gobecate had long been avoided during earlier work, though no official reason was ever recorded. While such accounts remain unverified, they contributed to the growing sense that this entrance was different from anything previously encountered at the site. By this point, the archaeologists understood that opening the seal would not be simple excavation. Any mistake could damage whatever lay beyond or destroy evidence of how the seal itself was constructed. The decision was made to proceed slowly, documenting every layer and change. According to reports, some team members expressed concern about what they were about to expose. Others felt a sense of urgency. Whatever lay beyond this entrance had been deliberately protected for roughly 12,000 years, and breaking through it would change the direction of the entire investigation. Inside the cave that was never meant for people. Once the seal was breached, the first thing the archaeologists noticed was how narrow the space became. The entrance sloped downward into a tight passage cut directly into the bedrock. Movement was slow and controlled. Only one person could pass at a time. According to reports from the team, the descent felt intentional, as if the cave was designed to force hesitation. This was not a space built for groups, gatherings, or repeated traffic. As they moved further in, what stood out most was not what they found, but what they did not. There were no signs of living, no soot on the walls, no ash on the floor, no tools left behind. According to archaeologists on site, even temporary shelters from this period usually leave traces of fire or food. Here, the absence was complete. The cave showed no evidence that people ever stayed inside it for any length of time. The walls offered the next clue. Tool marks were visible, but they were controlled and deliberate. The cuts were consistent, suggesting careful shaping rather than hurried excavation. According to stone specialists, this kind of work takes planning and time. It is not how people carve spaces meant for quick access or emergency use. This passage was shaped slowly with intention. In several places, the limestone surface had been smoothed by hand, not polished for decoration, but maintained. According to reports, this suggested the cave had been entered more than once before it was sealed. Yet, even with that access, there were no signs of wear linked to living or ritual gathering. Some researchers believe the maintenance was about preservation, not comfort. What unsettled the team most was how the cave controlled movement. The passage narrowed at specific points, forcing bodies to turn sideways or lower their heads. According to some archaeologists, this felt deliberate. The cave did not invite entry. It restricted it. Progress required focus and effort. A few team members later admitted feeling uneasy, though they stressed that this reaction was emotional, not evidence-based. According to unverified local accounts, this section of the mound had long been avoided, though no official records explain why. While such claims cannot be confirmed, they aligned with the growing impression among the team. This cave was not built for people to live in, gather in, or return to freely. Then the passage ended. The narrow corridor opened into a larger space, and the atmosphere shifted. What lay ahead did not resemble anything the archaeologists expected to find beneath Gobeclete. The path that ended on purpose. The larger chamber did not contain objects, carvings, or markers that suggested ceremony or daily use. Instead, attention shifted to a feature cut directly into the stone floor. A staircase descended further into the cave. It was narrow but precise. Each step was uniform in height and width, carved carefully rather than roughly shaped. A cave with an ancient staircase was found in Turkey. Speleologists were exploring abandoned caves in Turkey. According to excavation records, this was not the type of staircase made quickly or for temporary access. It showed planning. When the team examined the steps more closely, another detail stood out. The surfaces were worn smooth. This was not erosion from water or natural movement of stone. According to some archaeologists, the wear was consistent with repeated human contact. People had walked these steps many times before the cave was sealed. That realization changed the discussion immediately. A staircase used repeatedly suggests purpose. It suggests intent over time. There was no doorway cut into it, no gap, no visible seam that hinted at an opening, just a flat stone surface blocking further movement. According to reports from the site, this was the moment confusion set in. Staircases are built to reach something. In every known context, they lead to another level, a room or an exit. This one stopped without explanation. The archaeologists began debating what they were looking at. One group believed the wall was intentional from the beginning. According to this view, the staircase was designed to control movement. People were meant to descend the steps, reach the wall, and stop. This interpretation fits with known practices from the pre-pottery Neolithic period in southeastern Turkey, where access to certain spaces was limited and tightly controlled. Some researchers suggested the staircase functioned as a boundary rather than a path. Others disagreed. Another group believed the wall may not have been part of the original design. According to this interpretation, the staircase once led to an opening that was sealed later. In this scenario, the wall represented a second phase of construction, a deliberate closure added after the staircase had already been in use. Unverified reports from internal discussions describe disagreements over whether the wall showed signs of being added later or carved at the same time as the steps. A third view focused less on structure and more on behavior. Some team members argued that the wear on the steps suggested repeated descent without entry. People may have walked down the staircase knowing they would not pass the wall. According to this perspective, the act of approaching and stopping may have been the purpose itself. This idea aligns with certain Neolithic practices in the region where repeated actions carried meaning even when no physical outcome followed. To move beyond debate, the team turned to imaging. Non-invasive scans were used to examine the stone wall. The results shifted the conversation again. Behind the wall, the scan showed a defined enclosed space, a chamber. Why are they coming into this cave and creating this incredibly organized space? According to preliminary analysis, it was not a natural cavity. It had clear boundaries. At that point, the staircase no longer appeared pointless. It led directly to something that had been intentionally sealed away. Opening the wall would mean entering the space the builders had clearly tried to keep out of reach. And whatever lay beyond was exactly what the staircase had been built to approach but never allow anyone to enter. What the builders did not want seen. Opening the wall was treated as a controlled operation. According to excavation records, the stones were removed one at a time and documented in place before being lifted away. The team did not treat the wall as an obstacle, but as part of the evidence. Its construction showed planning, effort, and permanence. Whatever lay behind it had been intentionally sealed off. Behind the wall was a small chamber. It was completely enclosed and cut directly into bedrock. There were no side spaces, no markings, and no features meant for access or use. The room was too small for people to enter freely or remain inside for long. According to measurements taken on site, the space appeared designed to isolate whatever was placed there. At the center of the chamber were several skulls. There were no full bodies, no skeletons, no other remains, just skulls positioned together in a deliberate arrangement. They were not scattered or piled. They were placed with spacing and alignment that ruled out collapse, disturbance, or chance. According to the excavation team, this was not debris, it was placement. The skulls did not resemble normal human skulls. Their shape was immediately unsettling. Each skull showed extreme elongation. The proportions were wrong. The cranium extended backward far beyond what is seen in natural variation. According to physical anthropologists consulted during the excavation, this was not the result of pressure from soil or stone. The deformation was symmetrical and consistent across all specimens. That pattern only forms during life. This is where concern turned into alarm. Archaeologists began discussing cranial binding. Cranial binding is a known practice in some ancient cultures where a child's head is shaped deliberately using wraps or rigid supports during infancy. They would wrap the baby's head tightly with cloth and press it between two wooden boards just a few days after birth. According to specialists, the skull shapes in the chamber were consistent with intentional binding. However, the age of the site made this deeply troubling. Clear evidence of such extreme modification at this early date is rare and heavily disputed. More disturbing than the shape was the context. There were no bodies associated with the skulls, no signs of burial, no offerings, no markers of identity. According to archaeologists on site, Neolithic burial practices in the region almost always preserve a sense of personhood, even when skulls are emphasized. Skulls are usually part of a body, displayed, revisited, or honored. Here they were separated, isolated, and sealed away. This was the moment when language changed. In internal documentation, the team stopped referring to the find as human individuals. Instead, they described it as not human in classification. Experts later clarified that this did not mean a different species. It meant the skulls no longer fit any known category used to define a human person in Neolithic archaeology. The extreme alteration, the removal from bodies, and the deliberate isolation stripped away normal human identity. Several interpretations were debated. Some researchers suggested the skulls represented transformation, where individuals were altered to become something else. Others proposed containment, where altered beings were sealed away from the living community. According to unverified reports, a few team members argued that the goal may have been to remove humanity itself through modification and isolation. Comparisons were made to skull practices at other early sites linked to Gobecate. However, according to experts, those examples still show care, access, or remembrance. These did not. The chamber was sealed and abandoned. No one returned. The architecture reinforced that conclusion. Tombs are meant to be accessed. This space was closed permanently. According to some archaeologists, that suggests fear or control, not respect. The cave was not a burial place. It was a boundary. Once documentation was complete, the team faced a question archaeology rarely asks openly. If these skulls were altered so completely that they no longer counted as human by the standards of their own time, then what were they meant to represent? And why was so much effort spent guiding people toward this chamber only to make sure no one could ever reach it again? What this changes about Gobecate and early civilization. For many years, Gobecate has been described as a ritual gathering place, a location where early communities met to perform ceremonies and strengthen social bonds. Gobeclete is not simply a temple. It is a marker of a species on the cusp of change. The discovery of the sealed cave forces a different conclusion. Gobecate was not only a place of gathering, it was also a place of control. The cave shows that the builders understood how to restrict access and limit knowledge. They created paths that guided people forward, then stopped them. They sealed spaces permanently. This was not done for decoration or convenience. It was done to keep something separate from the living community. This changes how early belief systems are understood. Belief was not only about worship or shared meaning. It was also about managing fear. Fear of death, fear of transformation, and fear of things believed to be dangerous or unstable. The effort put into sealing the cave shows that these fears were taken seriously. The skulls inside the chamber show that human identity was not fixed. A person could be altered and then treated as no longer fully human. Once that status was removed, the individual could be isolated and sealed away. This was not random violence. It followed rules and decisions made by the group. That means belief already functioned as a tool. It shaped behavior, defined boundaries, and enforced order. People learned where they could go and what they were not allowed to approach. The cave taught those rules without words. Because of this, civilization may not have grown only from cooperation and shared labor. It may also have grown from fear and control. Early societies learned that managing belief could hold groups together and prevent disorder. If you enjoyed watching this video, kindly like and subscribe to this channel.